HB 2248, establishing the Kansas Nursing Initiative Grant Program. And we'll just get started. And I apologize in advance that I did not provide the copies of the bills for today. So if anybody would like a copy of either of these bills and you can't access it on your electronic device, we can get copies made. So just let staff know if you would like a paper copy. But we'll go ahead and get started with the hearing on HB 2248. First, we'd like to welcome Tara Mays, Vice President, State Legislative. Oh yeah, we need a bill brief. We do have someone with the bill. So Jill Walters, if you'd like to come to the podium and go over the bill. So we do have someone in the room with the bill. So thank you, Jill.
Good afternoon, sir, and members of the committee. You should have a bill brief in front of you on House Bill 2248. It establishes the Kansas Nursing Initiative Grant Program. And then we'll just get into the peanut of the program. It will be administered by the State Board of Regents, and then subject to appropriations, any post-secondary educational institution with an accredited nursing program could actually submit an application for the grant. They would be need-based or competitive grants for the expansion of nursing faculty, laboratory supplies, and tools for student success. The grants do not require any sort of a match in order to receive them. So it would allow institutions to apply and receive up to $100,000 for non-consumable lab supplies and equipment, expend the funds, excuse me, on adjunct clinical instructors, including if they were partially funded by a healthcare facility. They could request for funding for tools for student success, and this would be tutoring, student study skills, prep skills for taking the exams, and preparatory licensing classes. It could fund requests for student support that could affect the student's ability to attend and complete the program, and an example of this might be childcare services. In order to be eligible for the grant, the accredited nursing program would have to be nationally accredited, be approved by the State Board of Nursing, and have a National Council license exam test score at or above the most recent 3-year national average. Then it also provides things that I consider sort of program normal things, like the Board of Regents would have to prepare the form that you would put your application in for, and then would establish the times for submission of when you would apply for those grants. The board will establish standards and criteria for reviewing, evaluating, and approving any grants. And then with using that criteria and subject to any sort of appropriation for it, they would determine the amount and the number of grants. And then the bill also would require institutions who receive the grants to make periodic and reports to the Board of Regents as they may request on statistical and financial information. And then just for your information, for the purposes of this, post-secondary educational institution means any public university, municipal university, community college, tech college, and institute of technology, as well as the independent, not-for-profit, private institutions with their main campus or principal place here in Kansas. So with that, I'd be pleased to stand for questions.
Thank you, Jill. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Jill. Now we can move on with testimony, and we have several proponents. Tara Mays from the Kansas Hospital Association. Tara, welcome to the committee.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I am Tara Mays with the Kansas Hospital Association. Really appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today. Not often do I get to come to the House Higher Education Budget Committee. So appreciate the opportunity to appear before you in support of House Bill 2248. The Nursing Initiative Grant Program was developed back in 2006 as a way to address what was at that time kind of an anticipated nursing shortage. It really did allow programs to seek funds for equipment, faculty development, and technologies to keep their programs operating. What you see here in this bill is kind of a shift from what has formerly been a budget item to a statute to be able to make some of the changes that our members have indicated are of particular need to nursing and the profession of nursing in the state of Kansas. And so while you all were quite efficient on your budget this particular year, I appear before you for this bill for the purposes of having missed kind of the budget discussion and getting some of those pieces in place. At KHA, we have really developed a workforce committee to talk about some of the challenges. It will not be a surprise to you that since this program was put in place in 2006, there have continued to be some pretty drastic shifts in nursing trends in the state of Kansas. LPN and RN vacancy rates that were previously around 5 to 10% in the last few years have really climbed to be about 15 to 19%. And we know that we have an aging population. We've worked with a committee of professionals from around the state at KHA. Those include frontline nursing staff, HR directors, operations specialists, to help develop for us some recommendations. And so what you see in House Bill 2248 are part of the recommendations that are coming to us directly from our hospitals. We continue to come up with ways for that group to create ideas and tools that we can use to attract and really retain nurses. And this bill, we feel like, does just that, both the attraction and the retention of nurses coming into nursing programs and being able to stay so that they can serve in the profession after they graduate. The bill really does modernize an existing state program. So while it looks to have a new program in place, it's really just a modernization of an existing program. And it adds it to state statute to more closely mirror really what the industry is actually seeing in terms of trends. As you will not be surprised, like many industries, our hospitals have seen more than a 35% increase in both the costs of equipment and supplies overall. And so we know that these costs are also mirrored within nursing programs that purchase very similar equipment and supplies that we purchase within our hospital systems. However, as we've worked with the Board of Regents, they have indicated to us a desire for the legislature to kind of make some directions around what the threshold should be within these programs, whether they're adjusted or increased. And so our hospitals know that simulation lab equipment are costs that really do equate to millions of dollars. But these investments aren't just for simulated equipment. They're investments that prepare our nursing workforce for the very real life scenarios that they're going to face when they're serving patients at the bedside. So our nursing staff need those students to be as prepared as possible so that we can really be able to put them to work very quickly. And so this bill allows those thresholds to more closely mirror what the industry needs are when it comes to things like simulation equipment. Further, we hear often that our nursing programs struggle to keep nurse educators who can make so much more money in salary and wages by serving at the bedside. And this is really crucial for those nurses willing to teach the next generation of professionals that are going to serve in this field. So including the ability of nursing programs to seek these funds for nurse educators is of particular importance to us to keep those nursing instructors doing the important work that feeds the pipeline of professionals to come. The NCLEX, which is the actual test that nurses have to take, those passage rates are another emphasis that's in this bill that allows them to really begin to be tutored and funded before they're taking the NCLEX exam. And we frequently hear from hospitals and educators that are involved in nursing programs that this is of particular importance in the ability to invest in that. The truth is there are really limited slots within nursing programs, and we must do all that we can to ensure that those students have the tools they need to be successful, to get past final exams so that they're not taking up a precious slot and then not passing the NCLEX and being able to serve patients. So we're glad to see that House Bill 2248 includes the ability for a program to seek funds for things like general tutoring, as well as study support for NCLEX prep. The final reason that we believe that passing House Bill 2248 will be helpful to us is that it will allow portions of the Nursing Initiative grant funds to be received through multi-year commitments. We think that this will help nursing programs to really make more cohesive investments to better be able to serve the needs of the programs and the students. And while I would note that this bill doesn't seek to increase the funding within the Nursing Initiative program, we can't emphasize enough to you all the additional investments that are needed in these critically needed programs. Nursing is one of the highest needs in Kansas. We have, as you all are well aware, an aging population, and the highest number of job openings for RNs and LPNs will be over the next 10 years. Kansas has an estimated 3,200 new RN jobs between now and the end of 2030. Our nursing education programs have reported that they have seen a 39% decrease in enrollment over the last 10 years. And with 29% of RNs and 23% of LPNs that are slated to retire in the next 5 years, we are really at pretty crucial juncture in time. So we believe that House Bill 2248 makes a step in the right direction, and we hope that you will join us in supporting passage of House Bill 2248. Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Tara. We'll go to questions. Vice Chair Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just assume the need is more critical in rural areas than in urban areas. Is that a correct assumption?
You know, we have a map that shows the vacancy rates across the entire state, and I think you'd be surprised that the vacancy rate really is both in urban and in rural settings, kind of across the board. But I'd be happy to share that with you.
Sure. So this bill then does nothing to incentivize nurses who graduate to serve in rural areas.
We believe that there are probably a lot of other investments and programs that we're looking at, particularly in rural areas, things like the Rural Opportunity Zone, which we are, as hospitals, pretty heavy user of, that really are more rural focused, but certainly the overall encouragement of getting nurses through the pipeline and through the programs will help in both urban and rural settings.
And finally, so it seems the problem basically is you've got a lot of nurses retiring. You don't have near enough nurses coming on board to replace those retiring. So why is there such a lower interest in people wanting to go into nursing these days? And do you know of any studies, or do you have any theories or opinions about, I mean, the problem seems to be at its core that there's just not enough people going into nursing these days. And why is that?
That's a great question with probably a multifaceted answer that I wish I could provide to you. We at KHA are really focused on, what have we been doing historically? And I think that answer is we've been focused on perhaps a demographic that is a little older in recruitment for nursing programs. Those that were already kind of expressing some interest in nursing is what historically our industry kind of leaned on. And I think now what you see is sort of a push to kind of back that up into encouraging students at younger and younger ages to think about healthcare. We at KHA have a happyinhealthcare.org website. So if you all want to visit that, it encourages younger and younger folks, people in high school, people in middle school, to consider healthcare and nursing more broadly. So some of it is PR. Some of it is a little bit more enticing students to want to come to the programs and to the state. And some of it is just really kind of more probably educational, and if they're interested in that. And so I think that there's a multitude of issues that we're kind of focused on working on. And I think this bill, while it doesn't get at all of those things, certainly is a step at allowing some of our nursing programs to be successful when students are asked to come to or are interested in serving in nursing profession.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any other questions for Tara? We'll go to Representative Haskins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your question, or thank you for your testimony. It's been a long day. Here's it's really a point of clarification, and this might be more for the reviser, Jill, and it actually is. So if I may, this program seems to be both for public as well as not-for-profit institutions of post-secondary education with the main campus in Kansas. I thought I heard you say you utilize the definition of post-secondary educational institution under the law, which is for public, but the bill on line 10 also includes not-for-profit institutions, independent.
Jill?
So the bill defines post-secondary educational institution to be both of those things, sir. And so they're on, in the definition on page 2. Where am I? Is it on page 1? But anyway, the definition includes both of those. And so it would be, and that's how we, in the statute, that's how we talk about the private institutions. I mean, I think of them, I mean, there's many, but like Tabor and Kansas Wesleyan and those, that's who we were trying
Baker.
to capture there. And that's how we say it in the statute, that they have to be accredited by a nationally recognized accredited association, operate independently with the main campus or principal place of operation in Kansas, and are not-for-profit. So it would include the definition of post-secondaries and the nonprofits in this new definition here that we just call them post-secondary educational institutions.
Jill. Representative Haskins.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jill. I know that the state also has a definition for private institutions, and that includes out-of-state private. So I just wanted to clarify. And so my question related to your testimony here is, what have you heard from post-secondary institutions, public or private, as far as why this is needed? I know from the Kansas Hospital, and we can hear from your the next conferee, but what have you heard?
Yeah, so we've heard a lot from nursing programs as we have those relationships that there's kind of just an increasing need. I believe you have testimony from Advent Health from our chair, Monica Natsky, who talks about when we think about a program that started in 2006, that we have not updated the thresholds, but at the same time, we've seen inflation rates of more than 35%. We're probably not at the right place. And so what nursing programs really want to be able to do is make some strategic investments over multiple years. And we feel like this bill, in partnership with some of our conversations with those folks, kind of gets at their ability to be able to do that and hopefully be able to better serve those nursing students so that we can get them into the workforce.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It says that this bill is subject to appropriations. So therefore, how much money would you be looking for or wanting the Appropriations Committee to allocate for this every year?
So I'm happy to kind of take a stab at that. We're not asking for an additional appropriation than what's already in the budget bill for the Nursing Initiative Grant Program. Although we would say additional investments are needed in the future. So while this bill doesn't have a specific ask, it just allows the thresholds to change within the program, within the existing funds. But don't be surprised if we come back and ask for additional investments in the future.
Are there any other questions for Tara? If not, Tara, thank you for appearing for proponent testimony today. Next, we'll welcome to the podium Blake Flanders, President and CEO of the Kansas Board of Regents. President Flanders, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chair Howe, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear today to discuss HB 2248. We certainly support, and this has been a very successful initiative from our colleges. Now, has it mitigated the entire nursing shortage? Absolutely not. But we have really, since 2006, utilizing all the colleges, including the nonprofit colleges, have increased the number of slots, which is what the early intention was, and actually increase the number of graduates from our programs. I do just want to point out some differences, the way we administer the current program versus the way this statute reads, and just want to go through those. Currently, this says that HB 2248 would allow up to $100,000 per institution in grant monies to to be used for only non-consumable lab supplies. Now, currently, because they're expensive, we do allow programs to purchase consumable lab supplies with the equipment. So that would just be a change from what our current practice is. We also, the funding, this bill would allow grant monies to be used for only adjunct clinical faculty. Now, a number of years ago, we were able to really incorporate simulation faculty and more broad use types of faculty into the programs. We've allowed grant funds to be used for those simulation faculty in those sim labs. So that would be a bit of a difference. And for some of the smaller nursing programs, the grant is also the only way for their faculty to upgrade their knowledge and skills. And so we've allowed that for professional development. So that would be a difference in what we're currently doing. Not saying it's good or bad, but what we're currently doing as opposed to what this would call for. One other piece is what we've seen is that typically nurses, if you think about, I'll just tell you my community college alma mater is Colby Community College. I don't know if you all know where that is, but Clear Western Kansas. And what we know is that, well, most people hear Western Kansas Salina, so it's a bit further west. So what we do know is, is that many of the nurses go to school and then work very close to where they went to school. So they'll choose a program that's close to them. So at one time, not all the programs have waiting lists anymore. It used to be everybody had a waiting list to get into a nursing program. That's no longer the case. But when there was those waiting lists, if we had a program that had some slots available, we'd communicate it out to other students and that maybe couldn't get into their local program. But many times they wanted to go to the local program. They were tied to home maybe for other reasons. They might have been non-traditional in terms of the type of student that had other things. So what we do is, let's say the program falls below with the NCLEX scores and needs to bump those up in order to qualify. We've had a 10% set aside to help them help those programs. And some would say, well, if your program falls below, you're just cut off. There needs to be accountability. So I can appreciate that lens as well. Our lens has been, not that this would ever happen to Colby, but if a program like that got cut off, you just wouldn't have any nurses in that area. So you can choose to either help that program and enhance their delivery, or you're likely, to an earlier question about rural nurses, you're likely just not to have any nurses in that area. This also opens up, we have not, because the funding has been so small, but important, but small, we have not allowed a lot of student support funding. So in other words, this allows student support, they could, including but not limited to childcare services. So we've just said the dollars have to go into the actual nursing program. So that would be a difference. And then this bill requires no institutional match. We currently require an institutional match so that the state, for their $3.7 million, actually gets double that in terms of effort because the institutions put in a dollar-to-dollar match. We'd be happy to work with the Kansas Hospital Association if they have interest in addressing any of these differences before you work it in committee. But I do thank you for the opportunity to appear today. I'd stand for any questions.
Thank you for that, and thank you for giving us kind of a breakdown on how this bill would be a little bit different from how you currently administer it. We'll go right into questions. Go with Vice Chair Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, President Flanders. How many current slots do you imagine that we have open for nurses in the state of Kansas? I mean, round numbers.
Yeah, I would have to check the Board of Nursing website in terms of open slots. I don't think there's a great deal of slots open. Typically, we've been able to fill those programs, but I'd want to check. there was one day when I could tell you there was zero, but that's no longer the case. So I'm not sure exactly.
And the history has been not only no open slots, but a waiting list.
That was historical until we've had a bit of a shift in that the nursing profession is no longer as popular as it seems as it once was.
And then my follow-up question to that would be, do you have any idea why that might be?
Well, I think it's a hard job. Number one, I mean, there's a tremendous amount of responsibility. It seems like as healthcare went through some really tough times during the pandemic, and I think that nurses had more and more put on them. It's a difficult job. When this went through in 2006, and they wanted to increase the slots by 250, we really had an actual benefit in that we had a tremendous recession and people didn't retire. And so then as soon as the economy kind of leveled out and people could retire, then you had a whole drove of people retire because they were all kind of waiting to do that. I do think the profession, there's a tremendous amount of responsibility, and maybe that's been part of it. We need to do everything we can to promote the nursing positions.
My final question would be, do you think wages for nurses enters into this at all?
You know, I can't answer that. Our nurses, I do believe that we do have to analyze, do we have a shortage or do we have a shortage at the current pay rates? And I do know that hospitals have utilized traveling nurses at higher pay rates. So I'm thinking because of that, they may have just not been able to find anyone locally, but I'd want to talk to a hospital administrator to be sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Ranking Member Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Dr. Flanders, the institutional match, any feelings about that as to how it'll change the program one way or another?
Yeah, our institutions are matching right now. And I don't think that ever seems to be a bad thing. So we're getting double, the leverage with the program right now. So that'd be something that if I were at the institution, I might say, hey, I'd love to see that match go away. But the real serious institutions are doing that right now.
Any other questions? Any questions from online? We'll go to Representative Wagoner next.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I am very curious on institutional match. I mean, it seems like to have the individual nursing schools having some kind of skin in the game on whatever they're requesting from this, kind of makes sense. And so to do away with it seems kind of counterintuitive. And so, I mean, I'm taking it from.
We're in agreement.
Okay. Okay, well, very good. My other question is, so how many nursing students are there right now in the pipeline? Do you know what that number is? I mean, basically, is there any?
I do not. Some institutions do a really good job of keeping track of the waiting lists, but we can try to capture a number for you. What I'm saying is, though, it's not always a perfect science because there might be an urban institution that has a very large waiting list, but those folks aren't going out to another program. And so when you look at the total, it may not tell the whole picture, but I'll get you as much information on that as we can.
Thank you for that question. And I did have a question regarding the institutional match. Can that be not only from the tax dollars that the institution has, but can it be private monies that are contributed to a foundation? What is institutional?
Any of their budget. They just have to match, show that they're making the same effort. So let's say we were matching supplies and our grant bought 10 masks. They don't have to buy 10 masks, but they'd have to buy something of the value of that. So there's flexibility on that match. That, to my knowledge, at one time I had more hands-on administration of this, but to my knowledge, that really hasn't been an issue with the institutions.
Okay, so as long as the institution can demonstrate that they come up with those dollars, it doesn't matter if it's SGF or, okay,
So some of our institutions wouldn't have any SGF.
correct. And for the 3.7 million that's in the fund currently, do you have, what is the utilization like? Are you seeing that most of the funds are used every year, or are you seeing some that are having to, carry over those reappropriate dollars, or do you feel like,
There would be, if there is any carryover ever, it's because somehow the timing of some piece of equipment didn't come in. These funds are utilized. So nursing programs, one barrier, I think there was some questions about how do we get the volume up? There are, rightfully so, there are many regulations with a nursing program. I think we're going to have to think differently on how we deliver nursing education, working with the Board of Nursing and the Hospital Association to say, how can we really increase the volume here? Because we're at a point to where, and that might be another issue with people being attracted to the profession. If you go into a profession and 6 of the employee lines are going to be vacant and there's going to be 3 of you and there should be 9, that puts a burden on the current staff.
thank you for that. Are there any other questions for President Flanders? Seeing none, thank you for being here as a proponent on HB 2248. I will note to the committee and those listening online that there is written-only testimony submitted by Monica Natsky, Chief Nursing Officer, Advent Health South from Overland Park, Matt Lindsay, President of the Kansas Independent College Association, and Kylie Childs, Director of Government Affairs from Leading Age Kansas. So this concludes the bill hearing on HB 2248. Next, we'll open up the bill hearing on HB 2195, establishing the Kansas Tech College Operating Grant Fund administered by the Kansas Board of Regents. And to start off, we will have Jill Walters provide us an overview of this bill.
And members of the committee, you should have my bill brief in front of you. What House Bill 2195 would do is establish in the state treasury the Kansas Technical College Operating Grant Fund, which would be administered by the State Board of Regents. The expenditures from the fund would be used for instruction and operations to meet target objectives established by the Post-Secondary Technical Education Authority for each technical college's region and the entire state. And then it lists specifically which the technical colleges are there. And the bill would become effective on July 1st of the year it's enacted, and I'd be pleased to stand for questions.
Thank you, Jill. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Representative Wagoner.
Just point of clarification. So is this a brand new fund, or is this this operating grant fund, or is this just transferring it from someplace else, or what is up with this?
Jill.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Wagner, currently in the budget bill, there is no Kansas Technical College Operating Grant Fund as a special revenue fund. And so this would create it by statute. And then it would be up to the appropriators during the appropriation process if they would put the fund in the bill and then if money would be put into it. This does not move any money into it by the provisions of the bill.
Are there any other questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, Jill, thank you for the overview on HB 2195. Next, I'd like to welcome to the podium a proponent, Jim Jeanette, President of Kansas Technical College Association. So, Jim, welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. As many people are fighting the good old sinuses. Thank you for considering this bill. 3 years ago, when I was testifying to this committee, I was asked a question on behalf of the tech colleges. What does your group need that could make a big difference? And that's when we discussed the idea of this kind of an operating grant. And for the current fiscal year and the previous fiscal year, it's been funded kind of to try this. We called it an operating grant. As you know, the 7 tech colleges do not have local taxing authority, so we don't have that third leg of revenue. So this helps us have some investment capital, if you will, to maintain and continue to grow the performance that you've seen from our numbers every year. We've had increased enrollment, graduates, people going into the local workforce, stay in Kansas, good jobs, low student debt. They're consumers who are buying houses, paying taxes, but it allows us also to stay more competitive to meet the needs of our local employers with our technical programs. The last 3 pages of the testimony give you highlights of how each of the tech colleges have used these funds. This was in our earlier budget testimony. This is a game changer. And I know, I'm not going to say you have pressure, but I know there's a lot of emphasis on reducing state spending. Totally get that. I would like you to know this is an investment in workforce. We've proven it stays in the state and it makes an impact. So our ability to turn out people who, the nurses like you just heard about, many of the 2-year colleges, tech colleges, we all have healthcare programs. I have registered nurse programs, practical nurse programs, CNA programs. We're also the folks who fix your cars, put the furnaces in your homes, fix the air conditioning, the power when the power goes out, et cetera. So this kind of an investment allows us to keep up with equipment, professional development, facilities, changing the space, et cetera. So we've proven it's been very effective. Again, I appreciate the fact that a few years ago this committee asked that question so we could try this, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jim, for the proponent testimony. Are there questions from members of the committee? Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just wondering why you're, requesting funding in this way through a new grant program rather than, simply coming to us this year and saying that, we want a certain amount of funding for a certain thing. I'm just wondering why we're doing this through a new grant program rather than just a appropriation request through the budget like we normally do.
Very good question. From our point of view, trying to get this into the state treasury so it's there, again, it's subject to appropriations every year, but it's kind of so we don't, frankly, get forgotten. Again, this is that investment so that we can look forward to working with, continuing to show the accountability, working with the legislature, depending upon how well the state can fund things to give us the funding we need for these things. Our current funding structure, real quick, we do get some state appropriations for qualifying course enrollment primarily, some capital outlay, but it's not very large. Otherwise, most of us can only rely on tuition and fees. That has allowed us to maintain, but it doesn't allow us to upgrade things with facilities and equipment. We're making changes as rapidly as we can, for instance, because of artificial intelligence in terms of virtual reality training, because more and more of our companies are looking for us to provide that. So having this in statute kind of gives us a little more of a foundation to keep working with and not worrying every year that hopefully something will happen.
Are there other questions from members of the committee? Vice Chair Sanders.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Jim, do you have a number in mind as to how much this grant should be?
Sure. Realistically, what we've had the
Care to
last,
share that number with us?
the first year and this year, it's been 1.5 million per technical college. And we're good with that. I remember when we brought this a couple of years ago because each of the tech colleges agreed on the same amount. It's not scaled by enrollment. It's to help us with that infrastructure, that investment in our facilities to maintain. 1.5 million gives us a lot of flexibility to make that impact. In Manhattan, I've told you before, you can see the evidence we put in the Advanced Technology Center. New programs, more students. So that direct return on investment's readily apparent. So sure, we'd take more, but 1.5 million per institution, we're good.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We'll go next to Representative Wagoner.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So just in following up to the prior question, so, but this is not money that, like, when you guys presented your budget a few weeks ago, this is not listed in it?
It is.
It is listed in it,
It's
okay.
called base operating grant.
Okay, so this is just sort of changing somewhat how.
To put it
having a grant-
into statute with the Treasury, yes.
Okay, and so it was 1.5 million per college, and there's what, 10 colleges?
7 tech colleges, it's 10.5 million total.
Going from each other. Okay, thank you much.
President Jeanette, can you tell us a little bit about the funding that would go into this account year to year? Can you tell us how that relates to deferred maintenance? I know it's not something that you have primarily talked about this fund being used for, but you know, we hear that from other public institutions that deferred maintenance is a huge problem. But can you give us a perspective from a tech college standpoint of how you handle that?
Very good question. If you visited our campuses, and this is not to knock the universities or any other institutions, we're workforce, our facilities are not fancy. Our facilities are designed to be very flexible because how we train our students often changes. We're going to spill oil, paint, we might hit a hammer into a wall. We renovate our spaces using our own maintenance staffs. The capital outlay funds that are provided by the state through the regions for the tech colleges and the community colleges has a match to it. But frankly, until 2 years ago, capital outlay for us was about $125,000 a year. We had to match that. We've used that for deferred maintenance, but it would not allow us to make investment in new equipment and those kind of things. That's where the base operating grant has made the biggest difference.
Thank you. And also, just as we get more and more familiar with the budget and different streams of revenue, is there any conversation within the Technical College Association about streamlining the funding so it's, you know, not a little bit from this pot, a little bit from that pot? Could you add any?
Appreciate that question. We have discussed this with our members frequently. We would prefer this to remain whole. We'd be willing to make cuts in other areas of our budget. I think when I testified earlier, we mentioned cybersecurity funding. I know there's been talk about the business apprenticeship engagement funds that the two-year colleges get. This base operating grant for the tech colleges gives us the flexibility to push it where we need it. So we would be willing to look at other areas to make some reductions.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't really thinking about the reduction side of things, but just more from a conceptual standpoint or a structural standpoint, because, you know, you have capital outlay comes from one fund, and this operating grant allows you to have more flexibility. But do you feel like it's a good system the way it is, or do you think I'd be interested if you had suggestions for how to improve it? I don't expect you to have that today, but if you do have anything you want to share on that.
The one thing is, every institution has used these funds the last 2 years to either work with new facilities that we've badly needed or to renovate facilities because we don't have enough through capital outlay. But our group is pretty progressive and innovative, so I will be glad to get some ideas to you soon.
Thank you for that. Any other questions from members of the committee? Any questions from online? Seeing none, appreciate your proponent testimony today on HB 2195.
Thank you for hearing our requests.
Thank you. Were there any other proponents for HB 2195? I didn't have anything listed on the daily agenda. Eli says there are not. So I guess we'll go ahead and close the bill hearing on HB 2195. Okay, so we've had 2 bill hearings today. It sounds like potentially on the first bill, HB 2248, there could be interest in making a change to that, perhaps about the institutional match. We do have, I don't know if there would be any changes to the next one because it's pretty straightforward, but we'll plan on meeting again tomorrow at 1:30 It sounds like another full day in the House, but we'll come back at 1:30 tomorrow and consider bills that were previously heard. So if you have ideas for something that you would like to see a change made in one of these bills, please let me know, or please visit with the reviser and come up with some suggested language. And also, I know Tara Mays had left a little early. She had another hearing to get to. So if you're wanting to make a change on that, you might want to talk to her as well as the Board of Regents to see if we can come up with something that would be amenable to both. With that being said, does anybody have any questions for the chair? Representative Sawyer.
Yeah, when you say bills previously heard, are you talking about just these two bills?
Yes, it would be these two bills. Any other questions? Vice Chair Sanders.
So, Mr. Chair, is it your thought that we will not meet as a committee next week? Of course, 3 days on the floor, but will we not meet on Monday either?
I'm going to look to Eli to see if he can remind me what I put down for the weekly schedule tomorrow, but I do know we're on the floor all day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and I have no, okay, it's on call of the chair. And Friday, we don't have session, but what do we have on Monday? It's call of the chair too. Okay. So we just put call of the chair just as a placeholder in case there was something we had to do. But I don't plan on meeting next week in committee. Just wanted to put that out there. Meeting call of the chair in case something got thrown our way at the last minute. So I'd invite you guys all to come to appropriations today at 5. We're resuming higher education budget considerations. So if you're done with your 3:30s, please stop by. It'll be fun for the whole family. So, all right. Meeting adjourned.